Welcome to the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. I'm your host, Robin L. Owens, PhD, and this is where we dive in each week to give advice, tools, and tips for high-achieving women who have written books that make a difference for people while at work. I am a professor, and when I'm not doing that, I am speaking, writing, coaching, and teaching high-achieving women who have written books how to make a bigger difference, have more impact, and more purpose with their books. Okay, let's dive in. Hello. Before we dive into today's episode, I've got some exciting news for you. We just launched our new podcast website. That's right, and this is where you can catch up on all our episodes and find exclusive content and so much more. So head on over to leadershippurposepodcast.com, leadershippurposepodcast.com. I know it's a tongue twister, huh? Let me say it again. leadershippurposepodcast.com. And we are building it to the go-to spot for everything Leadership Purpose Podcast. So in the coming days, you'll see it grow more and more, but it's launched now. So go ahead over and check it out, leadershippurposepodcast.com. And for now, let's jump into today's episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. I'm so glad you're here and listening to the podcast. I really appreciate you. So thank you for being here. And today I'm talking with Dr. Cori Lathan. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Cori Lathan. She's a neuroscientist, technology pioneer, and social advocate, and the author of a best-selling book, Inventing the Future, Stories from a Techno Optimist. I love that title. Inventing the Future, Stories from a Techno Optimist. And she's a co-founder of Anthrotronics, a tech innovation firm, and she led it as a CEO for 22 years. She serves on multiple boards and committees, and she is an active thought leader and public speaker on technology trends that impact business, health, healthcare, education, and entrepreneurship. She's a social advocate for STEM, education, global health, and so much more that I can't wait to hear. Welcome, Dr. Cori Lathan.
Thank you so much, Robin. I'm so glad to be here. It's a long time coming.
Yes, I'm glad you're here. You know, I'm so excited about the work you're doing because it's very interesting to me and it's unique. We haven't had this kind of conversation on the podcast. So I'm just really glad you're here. Now, I was calling you Dr. Cori Lathan. Do you use Cori or do you use your longer?
I use Cori. Please call me
right.
Cori.
Okay. All right. Great. All right. So I read some of your introduction, a little bit of the bio that I have here, but you tell us in your own words about you, anything you want to say about you, and then also about the work you do.
Yeah. Well, I'm a tech inventor and I'm a problem solver. So I love to look at the world and say, how can we make it better? And I love using technology to make the world a better place and working particularly with teams of really smart people to do that. So that's kind of my shtick.
Okay. So how'd you get into this work?
Yeah. So growing up, I wanted to be an astronaut. And I loved Star Trek, and mostly I loved the technology around Star Trek, you know, the holodeck and the tricorder and the transporter and the replicator. So all the cool technology that enabled us to live and work in space and just really defined the future. So I've always been excited about inventing the future and being an ambassador, even that piece of it too, the fact that you could use technology to bring people together. So I ended up going to Swarthmore College for undergraduate, and I pretty much just put all the courses together that I loved, and we were allowed to have a special major, and mine was biopsychology and mathematics. And then I took a year off to work in France with the French Space Agency. And that's a whole other story. But then I went to graduate school in aerospace engineering and neuroscience at MIT. And that's when I really learned about the concept of tech transfer or dual use technologies. I ended up, when I finished my degrees, I came down to DC to be a professor of biomedical engineering, which was emerging as a field. And I had an appointment also at the National Rehab Hospital. And we had this whole center that was funded by both the Department of Defense, the military, and the Department of Education. And the idea was that all these technologies were emerging, robotics and virtual reality, and even artificial intelligence and sensors. And this was in the mid 90s. And the concept was that if you invested research in those emerging technologies, they would help everybody, not just the military, not just aerospace, not just health, not just commercial. So this concept that you could invest in the technologies to the benefit of everyone. Then for 20 years, I ran my company doing just that.
Say more about the company, what the company did.
Yeah. So my company is called Anthrotronics, Anthro-Human Tronics Instrumentation. And for over 20 years, I was CEO, founder and CEO, and ran it. We were an R&D company, and we had teams of people that worked on amazing projects. We did the first virtual reality system for the International Space Station. We developed an educational robot and assistive technology for kids with disabilities. We developed an instrumented glove for soldiers, medical devices for soldiers. And then during COVID, we went virtual and we merged with another medical device company, and I'm now an advisor to the company.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Because everything that, all the pieces of you when you were young, when you were a little girl and you wanted to do this work, you're still doing your own expression of it throughout the years. I think that's amazing. I love that.
Yes. Yes.
And you mentioned the French space program. And I'm guessing somebody else who's listening their ears might have perked up like mine did. Like, say a little more about that. That's not something we hear about every day.
Well, so it's a great segue to my book because I talk all about it in my book.
Good. So are you telling us we have to wait and read the book?
No, I can tell you more about it.
Okay.
So, but I'd love to tell you about it in the context of my book.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So my book, as you said, Inventing the Future, Stories from a Techno Optimist. One of the reasons I wrote the book is because as we were transitioning the company to a medical device product company, I really wanted to tell the stories of all the inventions we had done over the years. And so the inventions that my team worked on became the characters of the book. And so each chapter is one of my inventions, and they are the characters. So one of the chapters, which is virtual reality in space, tells the story of the 3D space experiment that we developed and flew on the International Space Station for maybe 3 or 4 years. And that all came about because when I was in college, I did research at Brandeis University at a space, it's called the Ashton Graybill Spatial Orientation Lab. And we did parabolic flight, which lets you experience zero gravity in an airplane. You fly the plane in parabolas, kind of like a roller coaster shape. And that gives you about 25 to 30 seconds of zero gravity. And you can also do experiments. You can look at the effect on the body. So I became really fascinated with sort of the neuroscience of gravity. How did gravity affect the way our physiology, our eyes and our ears worked together, and how our brains worked, and how we perceived things in space? And one of the main researchers, there was a big research lab in France, and I met the scientists from that lab, including Gilles Clément. And so I applied to do a research fellowship with him when I graduated from college. And so that led me to the National Center for Space Research in France that was funded in large part from the French Space Agency. So I collaborated with Gilles that year and then went to graduate school. And then in the late 90s, when we decided to build the International Space Station with all of our partners, Gilles and I proposed to use virtual reality in space to explore how our brains changed in space. How do we perceive objects? How do we perceive distance? All of that's super important for as we're building in space and living and working in space. And so because of our collaboration, our experiment was funded and we were able to do this virtual reality system, which had not, to that point, had not been done yet.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. Good for you. Good for you. And you've done so much, so much. And I'm sure I remember saying this to you when we talked before. It's interesting to hear how you use different parts of your brain to create all these amazing products and inventions for people. So anyway, I don't want to get too far away I have to get myself back on track here, but I remember talking about that with you before.
Yeah.
All right. So now back to the book. All right. So we talked about the book, and that was a part of the journey in the book, and you gave us the kind of overall structure. What was the catalyst for you to write the book? And what's the main message you want people to have?
Yeah. So I really wrote the book for 3 reasons. And one of them I just told you. It was a legacy memoir. My publisher calls it a legacy memoir of my company, because it's not a traditional memoir, although it has a lot of me in it. It's really a legacy memoir of my company and all of our wonderful projects and the teams that worked on it. The second big reason was to inspire students and young professionals in STEM fields. I really wanted young people who may be in their first job out of college or maybe struggling through differential equations or statics and dynamics. And I wanted them to see the cool things and the cool technology and cool problems they could solve. And so I wanted to be an inspiration. And that came out of so many years of mentoring students through my company and young professionals and seeing how excited they were by these projects. And then the final reason was really for the general public and for, women like you and me to counter the negativity around technology and the press. Not that we shouldn't be aware of potential negative consequences of technology, but we also need to understand our own agency and our own ability to create the future that we want to see. And technology is part of that.
Yes, yes. And you did exactly what you wanted to do.
Thank you. Good,
Exactly
good. Check.
Yes, exactly what you wanted to do. All right. So tell us now, let's switch to your author self. I mean, you have many parts of you in your work, right? So let's talk about your author self. What would you say in any part, the writing, the publishing, the marketing of the book, all of those pieces, what would you say has been the greatest challenge?
So the greatest challenge was the greatest challenge and the pleasure was that this was a passion project. I wasn't doing this necessarily for my livelihood. In fact, I'm donating profits to nonprofit organizations that support students in STEM. I'm also, and I'm also doing speaking. And so I'm doing things that I'm passionate about that are part of my livelihood, but I never wanted it to be my job. So the downside is that it sometimes took a back seat to work and to family. So I think making it a priority was the challenge. But I think like learning any new thing for me, I tend to go all in. Like I've just learned pickleball. During the pandemic, I learned the ukulele, and I tend to go all in. So even though I didn't need to write the book or it wasn't a core piece of my livelihood, I enjoyed it and the challenge of learning something new and the challenge of making it a priority, put it front and center when it needed to be.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially when you have all those other kind of moving parts going on. All right. So then on the flip side then, and you mentioned a little bit, but on the flip side, was the greatest joy in the whole thing?
Oh, well, definitely telling the stories. I mean, being able to tell the stories of all the just cool things that we had done over the years, and the stories of my team, and just this my own story. I didn't expect how much I would enjoy that. I didn't expect how much I would enjoy the storytelling. And in fact, very early on, I changed the name of the book. Originally, it was a more traditional knowledge share book where it was the lessons from a techno optimist. But I very quickly changed it to stories because that felt more authentic to me. And what was really the joy of the book were the stories.
Yeah,
There's lessons, there's lots of lessons, but it really is the stories that are front and center.
that it makes sense to me. And you strike me as a storyteller. So that does strike me. A teacher too, which speaks to the lessons, but through storytelling. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see that. All right. So you said this a little bit. You talked about you wanted to be an astronaut when you were a young little person. But now thinking back, is there a part of you that is reflected in the book? Now we know you created the company and this is the life story of the company, right? But for you personally, inside there, is there a part of you that is reflected in the book?
Oh yeah, 100%. Every chapter, I think you learn about me and my approach to solving problems and my approach to dealing with bullshit. Learning how to say no to people, learning how, when something doesn't pass the smell test, learning just dealing with understanding myself and knowing what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do. I mean, so I reflect pretty honestly on that and in my stories. I mean, again, I don't explicitly call it out as lessons, but being a woman in science and technology, there's lessons that I think there's stories that will resonate with many women, not only in science and technology, but just us as women and being maybe pushed aside or not necessarily treated with the respect we always deserve.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so you've had a lot of experience. You shared some of it with us, and we can get more in the book. And we just know of your expertise because of your bio. So, from any area of your either professional life or your personal life, speak to the listener. And this is how I describe the listener: high achieving women. Now, this is what I mean by high achieving: ambitious, goal oriented, responsible at work and at home, good at a couple things. So people come to them at work and at home in questions for support. And on top of doing all of that, they wrote at least one book.
Right.
And
Right.
So I'm thinking, well, while they're supporting everybody else, who supports them?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I created the podcast. I thought, well, we can talk to each other. So I bring in people like you and you just share from your experience, and it'll be our way of supporting each other. All right. So now, given that whole scenario, what's some word of advice or a tip or a piece of wisdom from any area of your work or life that you'd like to share?
I would say, staying on the same theme that we've been discussing, technology is your friend. Humans plus technology is more than the sum of its parts. It's more than technology alone. It's more than human alone. So, and we're all responsible for what that looks like. We're all responsible for using technology to create the future, both in how we use technology personally and professionally, and also the efforts we support to use technology, again, personally or professionally. So I think that is sort of in the theme that we've been talking about. I think it's also good advice. I mean, as authors, I mean, I know I couldn't have done it without technology. I learned to use tools that I really hadn't used before. I mean, I had wrist surgery, so I couldn't write. So I had to do voice to text or do voice memos and then translate them. Now, those are tools now that I use in my work life. So, so those are simple tools, but now we're talking about Chat GPT. I might have run some of my drafts through ChatGPT and gotten some good suggestions. ChatGPT is really good at coming up with like subtitles. Like I might have had more clever subtitles in my book if I had ChatGPT. But no, I mean, so again, it's just keeping that positive attitude and teaching. And now I'm teaching my kids how to use ChatGPT responsibly. So personally, professionally, technology is your friend.
Yeah, yeah. And that keyword responsibly, because I think a lot of people these days are afraid of it because of maybe other people's irresponsible use of it. And you don't
Yes.
hear as much what your message is about, sort of the positive side and
Yep.
uplifting and actually making the best of it. In the popular culture, we hear more the tendency toward the fear and
Yep.
the concern about it. But yeah, I appreciate your perspective on bringing out the positive aspect and teaching to use it responsibly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because people are at the end of it, no matter what. It's not by itself. People are using it. So it really is the people, those same people who are everywhere else. It's
That's
not like
right.
there's a whole group of people that suddenly came out with the AI. It's those same people that could use anything else for good or for bad.
Right. And why it's so important to be at the forefront. I mean, you've heard of probably bias in AI.
Mhm.
Well, we need people of all types to be creating AI so that it reflects all communities. And that's true for any technology, not just AI. So we all need to be part of it. Even if we're not technologists, we need to all raise our voice.
Yeah, yeah, because it's very quickly becoming a part of all our lives, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so the podcast is leadership purpose. So would you say it's important to have a sense of purpose in your own life or for people in general? Do you think it's important? And if so, why? And if not, why not?
So, yes, I do. I mean, I don't think I could do anything if I didn't see purpose. And to me, I'll give you an example for what I mean by that. And I'm on a lot of boards now. And one of the boards was feeling very dysfunctional. And for me, it was, why am I staying on this board? What's purpose? What's the purpose of this work? Is it because I believe in the mission? Is it because I need the money? Is it because I like the prestige? I mean, there's lots of things that, float people's boats. So, and I'm not, I think they're all valid at different times and different points. But for me, I really had to think about, what is my purpose and in doing this work? And I realized that as a technologist, I had a voice on the board that really no one else had. And so I was able to support the staff of the organization because it was a tech organization, and I was able to support them by showing them I understood what they were doing and appreciated what they were doing. And so I was able to find, like, why do I need to be on this board? And so that gave me a sense of purpose and a reason for doing the hard work, which, if I didn't see a purpose in doing that work, well, then someone else maybe should step in and do that work, and I should use my time more wisely. So that's just an example of, you need, I think, each individual and each piece of work, you need to figure out why are you doing this work? What's your purpose in this environment, in this team, in this community? So for me, that's really important for myself.
Yes, yes. Well, Corey, you've been so generous with your time this afternoon, and you shared so much, so many gems you dropped for us. And is there anything that I didn't ask you about that maybe is coming to your mind right now, or something that you just want to share with people before we tell them how they can be in touch with you?
No, I think we covered it, Robin. I mean, I really enjoyed this conversation. I think having leadership and purpose in the same phrase is just really spoke to me. So I'm really honored that you would have me on your podcast.
Well, I'm honored to have you here and to share with you and share your brilliant mind and heart with the people. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Robin.
And if people are wanting to know how to get in touch with you, get your book, or just follow what you're doing, how can they be in touch with you?
So my website is just CoriLathan.com. And on LinkedIn, you can always connect with me on LinkedIn. It's just Cori Lathan. You can find me on LinkedIn. But website's best, CoriLathan.com. And you can connect with me all sorts of ways there.
Okay, great. Thank you again, Dr. Cori Lathan. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Robin.
Okay, everyone, and I'd love to hear from you and just hear your response to the episode, thoughts on tech, or whatever you're thinking. I'm on all social media at Robin L. Owens, PhD, but I'm mostly on LinkedIn. So just send me a message over on LinkedIn at Robin L. Owens, PhD, and tell me what you're thinking. And if you're an author and you've been thinking about expanding your message beyond the book, but you're asking yourself, well, I don't know if my book is ready to be expanded into a course, but I'm thinking about a course. If you're asking that question, I have the answer for you in my checklist that you can get over at createmasterfulcourses.com, createmasterfulcourses.com, and you'll find your book to course readiness checklist. And until next time, this is Dr. Robin. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. If you enjoyed it, head on over and rate and subscribe so you never miss an episode. New episodes drop every week, and I can't wait to hang out with you again soon. Meanwhile, this is Dr. Robin signing off. See you next time.